Hello there, I'm Jack, and I welcome you to Phantom Chamber, a safe space of dread and distress. Feel free to stick around. It was January of 1959, when Igor Dyatlov led a group of 8 young Soviet hikers, comprising 7 men and 2 women, and mostly university students, into the Ural Mountains, attempting to reach Ortoten from the small settlement of Vizhai. The group pitched a tent and settled in for the night. Hours later, all 9 fled the safety of the tent and perished in the freezing, snowy conditions. Some in the party succumbed to hypothermia, but others were found with grisly injuries. The Dyatlov Pass incident, as it came to be known, has inspired so many dark and often outlandish potential explanations. Before delving into the most prominent theories, let's consider the facts of the matter. The group originally consisted of 10 highly experienced hikers who were, with one key exception, all students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. The odd one out was Semyon Zolotaryov, a last-minute addition to the group. In the early stages of the trek, one member of the group dropped out due to ill health. The rest carried on, taking photos of each other, larking about and recording diary entries that expressed their excitement about the adventure to come. "I wonder what awaits us in this trip," one wrote. "What will we encounter?" A search party sent to locate the missing hikers found the remains of their tent on the side of a mountain called Kolat-Syakhl. Inside were the hikers' boots, clothes, and maps, along with some food laid out, seemingly for a meal. The side of the tent had been slashed open from the inside, a sign of just how desperate they'd been to get out. Footprints made it clear the group had left the tent without any shoes. At the base of a nearby tree, next to an extinguished campfire, lay the corpses of 21-year-old Yuri Doroshenko and 23-year-old Yuri Krivonishenko. Both had seemingly frozen to death, but also exhibited burn marks and multiple abrasions. Not far away, lying in the snow, were the bruised bodies of the group's leader, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov and 22-year-old Zinaida Kolmogorova. It looked like both had been trying to return to the tent when they died. Some days after this, the body of 23-year-old Rustem Slobodin was also discovered. He had a fractured skull. The remaining hikers were found in a ravine near a shelter they'd attempted to carve out of the snow. Nikolai Thibault-Brignole, a 23-year-old graduate, had a caved-in skull, while 24-year-old Alexander Kolovatov had a deformed neck and was missing his eyebrows. The oldest hiker, Semyon Zolotaryov, and 20-year-old Ludmila Dubinina had crushed chests with multiple broken ribs. Both were missing their eyes, and Ludmila's tongue was gone. A criminal investigation was carried out by a prosecutor named Lev Ivanov, but it came to a cryptic conclusion. The cause of their demise, the report said, was an overwhelming force which the hikers were not able to overcome. Their campsite was made on the slopes of Kolat-Syakhl, Dead Mountain, at about 3,600 feet. All the travelers, 8 of them in their early mid-20s with Zolotaryov in his late 30s, were experienced mountaineers, having skied across frozen lakes and totally uninhabited areas to get there. Despite nasty weather and slower progress than they'd planned, their last diary entries reflected high spirits. Charmingly, in a very typical Soviet way of bonding, they even produced a little newspaper about the trip, which they titled the Evening Ortoten, and which bore the headline, "From now on, we know that the snowmen exist." It goes on to say they can be met in the northern Urals, next to Ottertine Mountain. They were, it's thought, probably jokingly, referring to themselves. After the first 5 bodies were found, a legal inquest began, eventually determining that the cause of death was hypothermia. The deaths seemed kind of straightforward at first. Sure, these dead were in various stages of undress, including one in his underwear. But this was explained away as paradoxical undressing, which happens in about 25% of hypothermia victims, as the hypothalamus malfunctions and body temperature seems to rise when it's really dropping. But then, it got super weird. The skiers' badly damaged tent, it was determined, had been cut open from the inside, and all of their stuff was still in it. Why were they dead of exposure if they'd had access to their winter gear before going out into the freezing winds? To all appearances, they appeared to have left the tent out of their own volition, and in a hurry. Bizarrely, Zolotaryov fled the camp with his camera, but not his gear as well. Rustem Slobodin, who, along with Dyatlov and Zina Kolmogorova, seemed to have died in a pose indicating he was trying to return to the tent, had a small crack in his skull, but it was ruled that the elements were what killed him, not the fracture. No external wounds were discovered. Things got really shaken up when the 4 bodies in the ravine were found and examined. Both Dumina and Zolotarev had fractured ribs, while Nikolai Thibault, Brignol's had a major skull fracture. One of the investigators compared the force required to injure a human so severely to that of a car crash. The injuries were absolutely not caused by force, exerted by another human being. Once again, no soft tissue damage was observed, as though the skiers' bodies were crushed by pressure. When Dubinina was found to be missing her tongue, the theory of another party's possible involvement must have arisen again. Who would do this? Why? Or did another skier from the group cut it out? And where did it go? But there were absolutely no indications of other people having been nearby, apart from the other travelers in Dyatlov's group, not even the native Mansi people sometimes known to inhabit the area. And perhaps most baffling of all, some of the skiers' clothing was found to contain significant levels of radiation. Due to an absence of a guilty party, the inquest was closed in May of 1959, only a few short weeks after the last 4 bodies were discovered, and the files were archived and classified. When they finally became accessible in the 1990s, post-Soviet era, parts of them were missing. Without any real public answers to any of these freaky questions, all manner of insane theory flourished around the incident over the ensuing 50 years. But the Soviet government's very sudden closing of the case seems to have made it the most popular culprit in the minds of the theorists. Orange spheres were sighted in the sky on the night the Dyatlov group died by campers about 50 miles away from the scene. Some explained these away as R-7 intercontinental missile launches, seeing as the last campsite was located on the pathway from Balakonar Cosmodrome to Chornaya Guba, a Soviet nuclear testing ground. Per the radiation found in the skiers' clothing, some speculated that they drank melted contaminated snow. A 12-year-old eyewitness who attended 5 of the skiers' funerals claimed that the bodies had a deep brown tan. And you can't talk conspiracies and radiation without mentioning aliens and UFOs, of course. Some folks even blamed the snowmen referenced in the students' newspaper. Early on, it was theorized by Soviet authorities that the Dyatlov party may have been killed by the Mansi, an indigenous people of the region. The idea that the hikers were slaughtered for straying onto sacred land, or perhaps as part of a shamanic ritual, persisted for some time. Much was made about the presence of a Mansi chum, or dwelling, in the vicinity of the hiker's tent. We often see Mansi signs on the trail. I wonder what they write about. Zinaida Kolmogorova noted in her diary, while one of her fellow hikers, identity unclear, also recorded that Mansi writings appear on trees. All sorts of obscure, mysterious characters. This has been roundly debunked as a baseless theory rooted in a misunderstanding of Mansi culture and rituals. And if they were indeed rounded up and murdered, why were the bodies found in different locations, some more injured than others? Two members of the Dyatlov group have been the focus of particular speculation. Why was Semyon Zolotaryov, a 37-year-old veteran of World War II, attached to this group of young students and graduates? Furthermore, is it significant that, a few years earlier, Yuri Krivonishenko helped clear up a radioactive leak at a secret Soviet nuclear facility? An incident which has since been compared to the Chernobyl disaster. According to one theory, Zolotaryov and Krivonishenko, and potentially a third hiker, were working for the KGB and had joined the Dyatlov trek to rendezvous with CIA agents in the Ural Mountains. While handing over radioactive materials and fake nuclear secrets, the Russians were supposed to take photos of the American agents. The theory goes that CIA men got wise to what was going on, leading to a fight breaking out and the eventual massacre of the Dyatlov party. In 1990, Lev Ivanov, the man who led the initial investigation into the incident, published a sensational article claiming he'd been ordered to censor some of his key findings. In particular, the unusual chair marks on trees near where the bodies were found, which in Ivanov's view confirmed a source of heat ray that had been purposefully aimed at some of the helpless hikers. His article also alleged that floating balls of light and other weird phenomena had been reported over the Ural Mountains in February. Ivanov doesn't mince his words, saying that, based on the evidence gathered, the role of UFOs in this tragedy was quite obvious. Whether these supposed UFOs were of alien origin or were experimental Soviet weapons, the most widely accepted theory is also the most mundane. The group fled the tent because of a slab avalanche, then succumbed to the harsh conditions. A slab avalanche is where a compacted block of snow slides down a slope when the underlying, weaker snow layer gives way. According to this theory, a combination of factors, including mountain winds, known as katabatic winds, and a weakening of the mountain snow during the pitching of the tent, led to the catastrophic avalanche. The thinking goes that once the avalanche hit, the group slashed their way out of the tent in a panic, with some of them severely injured by the impact, explaining the broken ribs suffered by Zolotaryov and Dubinina. For example, the ones who escaped, with mild cuts and abrasions, helped the others flee what they assumed was the danger zone for a full-scale avalanche, only for the whole group to perish from the intense cold or their injuries. Alternatively, all 9 hikers may have escaped the crushed tent without serious injuries, which would explain why there were no tracks in the snow, suggesting people had been assisted or dragged. Thereafter, 2 succumbed to the cold by the tree. 3 froze to death, trying to get back to the tent, and 4 others died by the ravine, some being badly injured or killed while trying to create a snow shelter. The gruesome facial damage could have been the result of animal scavengers and decomposition. Many Dyatlov commentators are skeptical, and the finer details of the slab avalanche theory are hotly debated. Ultimately, though, it remains perhaps the most plausible explanation of what befell the explorers that cold, bleak night in 1959. To this day, a scientific explanation for the deaths of these 9 people has yet to be nailed down. Manifold publications were inspired by the incident, some investigative journalism and some entirely fiction. The mountain pass where the skiers set up their last campsite was named for Dyatlov, and the Dyatlov Foundation, established by Yuri Kontsevich, none other than the child eyewitness at the skiers' funerals in 1959, still works to persuade the Russian government to reopen the investigation. The foundation operates the Dyatlov Museum in Ekaterinburg as well, to commemorate the dead travelers and tell the story of their strange ends.